Been through struggles, had to conquer them all. We rise and give back to answer the call. We measure success by the lives that we shape. Making an impact, we're raising the stakes.
Brought to you by Kornit Connections, bringing the print industry together for a higher purpose.
Welcome to the Raising the Stakes podcast, where we interview entrepreneurs and business owners to follow their journeys to success, the challenges along the way, and how they use their businesses to give back to the community. Today is a very special episode. We're filming here live in the Kornit headquarters, who's our gracious sponsor. And our guest today is co-author of our book, Inclusivity, and friend, and really just honored to have you here, because what you're doing for the community and this industry is pretty impressive. And I think kind of before we get started with the questions, I just want the audience to know how you and I came together, because I truly believe we were destined to meet. As we'll get into, your business is really, the foundation of it is really about hiring people with disabilities. And obviously that's what I've been championing in the print industry and what we do at Stakes Manufacturing. And throughout the journey, both in the print industry, but also in the disability community, I had countless people be like, hey, you got to meet the guys from Spectrum Designs, because we were the two known people that were inclusive of people with disabilities. And literally for years, my mentor in the employment side had told me I had to meet you. Just everybody kept saying it, and we just never crossed paths. And then one of our other co-authors, Marshall Atkinson, interviewed me. And after his interview, he was like, Jed, you got to write a book on this. People see you speak, but they need a book to actually sort of have this step-by-step guide. And I was like, I'm in. And about a week later, he called me and he says, Jed, I've been doing this pro bono work for an organization, Spectrum Designs. What do you think about them coming in and co-authoring this book with us? And for me, you guys are a nonprofit. We're a for-profit business. We're really heavy in DTG. You guys are, as we'll talk about, are in screen print, embroidery, and some DTF. It seemed like a great balance, right? And there's a lot more screen printers out there than there are digital printers. So I also wanted to make a bigger impact with this industry. And again, everybody had already told me about you. And I said yes. And then for whatever reason, Marshall waited about a week before he sent an email to introduce the two of us. And when he sent that email to introduce us, I was sitting in the Washington Hotel in DC with the CEO Commission for Disability Employment, and we were preparing to go lobby congressmen and senators on Hill Day. Yeah. And when I got the email, literally 30 seconds after I got the email, you raised your hand to ask a question and said, hey, I'm Patrick from Spectrum Designs. And I'm like, holy shit. Like, this is this is way too serendipitous. This is fate. And then you and I ended up
couple
whiskeys at the bar later.
And we're getting ready for Hill Day,
and then by the end of the couple whiskeys, you and I were like, let's do this.
The book's written.
So, I'm a firm believer that everything in life happens for a reason. And you were brought into my life for a reason. And, our connection, I think, is going to help continue the momentum to changing the industry. And hopefully the book, far exceeds even just the impact on the print industry, but far beyond, because everything in the book has application in all industries.
Totally. Yeah. Totally.
But today's not about the book. Today is really, it's about you. And you've also had a personal impact on me. I remember when I was having some issues, even with my kid, you sent me a book. I don't know that I've ever had somebody send me a book before. So, little things like that. You're just a great human being, and I'm so excited for everybody to hear your story. Let's start at the beginning, man. take us way back. I mean, when I say way back, I mean, you don't just like snap decide to be an entrepreneur. So like, what was it about your upbringing or your parents, or what experiences early on in life led you to sort of becoming an entrepreneur, believing you could do it, having the balls to take those type of risks?
Yeah. Well, there's a few things I realized, I never really thought about this, but I realized, like, I grew up, my mum's an entrepreneur. My mum had a business that was actually in our house and grew so large that we had to move to a different house, and the business took over the house that we were in, like became offices. Like literally the house became an office.
What was her business?
It was management training, and ironically or coincidentally, for people with disabilities to get into the workforce, but in the UK, and or also to upskill and train like nurses and caregivers to get higher levels of vocational training so that they can get paid more. So I had this great business in the 90s and 2000s and was very successful. Unfortunately, that business failed, and at the same time, their marriage failed. And we used to go on these great family vacations to the south of France, and that stopped. And I was like, all right, well, this was not one of those, it wasn't, not any divorce is good, but it was a particularly bad one. And so I was like, all right, I got to get out of here. And that was when I first went to America and went to a summer camp for kids with special needs. But even before that, from an entrepreneur's point of view, I mean, when I was in high school, Tim and I were what was called head boy and deputy head boy. He was the head boy class principal and I was his VP, right? But it was called a head boy. And we charged like a tax to the students so we could buy a foosball table. It was like $1.
And Tim's our
another co-author as well, yeah, and he's our COO. So he we kind of reverse roles now, but he was the head. Anyway, so we get this foosball table. It made so much money. It was like 50 cents a play. It made so much money that we bought all new furniture for the common room. We like bought lunch for everyone, and we kept making money from it. That we were like, what are we going to do with this? And so we ended up like buying like a water supply for a village in Africa and like goats and like all this stuff. So like that kind of using capitalism for good, I guess, in a lot of ways, and was instilled in me for a long time from my mum's business to doing that. And then, as I said, unfortunately a big family event, but then that's like a door closed and a window opened, and I went to America and worked at a summer camp for kids with special needs, which was my first introduction to autism, and that was a whole life-changing thing in itself, too.
How did you pick the camp?
The camp picked me. I know it sounds cheesy, but it was a checkbox application. It was a time, this was 2005, so there was no smartphones. Every house had that one computer, and my dad was helping me because my parents had separated and everyone else went with my mum, and I chose to live with my dad. And so he was helping me fill out the application. And you get to a question of all these different kinds of camps, right? Like Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, sports. You could be working in a kitchen. Like, I didn't care. I just wanted to be in America and get away from this horrible family situation. And it got to the special needs question, and the question, it was yes, no, or would be willing to, checkbox. And I almost put no. We wouldn't have been sat here if I'd put no, because I would never have worked at a camp for kids with special needs. I wouldn't have dedicated my whole career to this. And I put would be willing to, because my dad was like, why don't you just keep your options open and see what happens? And that moment changed my whole life, because then I got recruited and placed at a special needs camp upstate New York, learned what autism was, learned about people with disabilities, and just went from this kind of 18-year-old where I'm the center of my own universe to, and as a sibling, like, it's bigger than you, right? And like, there's people who've been dealt different hands, and what right do you have to feel sorry for yourself when someone else has got a big smile on their face and they've gone through more challenges in the first hour of their day than you ever, you have in your whole day, And so just changed my whole outlook on life. And it was there at that camp where I had so many conversations with parents about the after, about getting older, about the school bus stop coming. And, that's what inspired me to start a business and dedicate my whole career to this, because I said, well, someone has to think about those kids and those families where their parents are so fearful. Our job as parents is always to help our kids, or, to have a better life than we had, to set them up to be as happy and as fulfilled as they can be. I think when you have a child with a diagnosed disability, that whole thing gets turned upside down, right? And then your fear and your worry around that, and you getting older and passing that on is just so heightened that, Spectrum Designs was born out of that necessity about thinking like, what can we do to help families and the individual who face such high unemployment rates when they get older and still can and want to be part of the workforce, you know?
So you said that the camp really exposed you to disabilities and autism. Had you had any exposure?
Zero.
I mean, obviously your mom did some stuff, but
She
that
did
was
some
just...
stuff, but it was, zero. I mean, schools weren't inclusive when I grew up, you know, it was a separate class or even separate schools. I really had zero. And in a way that was great because it was like, there was no playbook for me. You know, I couldn't be like, well, here's the do's and don'ts and here's things people can and can't do. And so I just been like, all right, well, I guess I'll just treat this person the same as I would treat my little brother, you know, and just fell in love with the work. And it wasn't work. I think that was the key. I remember I landed at Heathrow Airport in London and my dad was like, how was your summer? You know, and I was like, honestly, it didn't feel like it work. And it was that old adage, you know, he said, where like, when you love your job, you never work another day in your life, you know? And I was like, all right, this is what I want to do, you know? But obviously that was just the beginning of the idea of creating Spectrum Designs. And
Well, I mean, I think that's beautiful because, I mean, even when we look at our facility, you know, I think it's the norm that most people don't actually get exposed to people with disabilities. Like if you don't have somebody in your family, most people that we hire have never even had a conversation with somebody with disability.
Right.
And that sort of like foreignness of it makes it scary, it makes the unknown. And that's incredible that, you know, you kind of just jumped right in and that it was so fulfilling, because I think that's the other takeaway is that like how much fulfillment comes from your life when you're working with purpose.
Yeah. And doing for others before yourself.
Right.
And doing something that's bigger than you, I think is the key as well.
Yeah. So tell me the story of the parent conversation that you've told me before that truly kind of was the inspiration.
Yeah, it was the end of one of the summers, and I was, pick up and drop off, and I talked to all the families, you know, where are your kids going? What are they doing? Where are they heading? You know, are they going to the beach? Are they going back to high school or whatever? And I just remember one mother, like, I was like, what's happening? Where's he going? What's he doing? And she was just like broke down in tears and was just like, I don't know. I don't know what happens next. There's no job. High school's finished. There's no program anywhere near us that is good for him. And frankly, my one wish is I just wish I could live one day longer than my son so I can guarantee I'll always be there to take care of him. And that moment was like, all right, because no one should wish that, right? To outlive their child. And that's how fearful she was. And I lost touch, but that one conversation still motivates me to keep.
I mean, I'm sure it hits even harder now that you are a dad.
Oh my God, yeah. When you have kids too, oh my God, get it.
I mean, I can't. It's a crushing comment. I mean, how awful to think that that's like
to wish it,
right?
But you get it too, because you're like, the world can be cruel and it's not always kind and it's not always like welcoming, and that's why what you're doing and what Spectrum Designs is doing is like, it's bigger than a print company. It's introducing the wider community to something they haven't necessarily seen or been connected to, and then breaking down those stigmas and stereotypes and walls and just being like, it's just another human being. Okay, maybe they think and learn and act a little differently in certain situations, but like at the end of the day, it's a human being, and every life has value and precious, and so. Yeah,
I mean, as a parent, it's the two scariest parts, of your life is one, when you get that first diagnosis and sort of like you feel like the vision of everything that you thought your life was going to be your child is different. Your child hasn't actually changed. Your child's still just your child, right? Then that second one is that transitioning out of high school when all that structure disappears, the friendships, the social atmosphere, all of that. And it's like, what is next? I remember how scary it was for our family and what my brother went through, and there was a lot less companies like ours back then, and there was a lot less support organizations, and it's a scary time, and I know that my parents, even at a young age, were already talking to me about, well, if we die and, I felt this tremendous responsibility at an age where I didn't even know what responsibility meant.
Yeah. How blessed, because I've met so many siblings, and many, to their credit, are like you, right? That just like go headfirst into it and dedicate their whole lives to it. But there are many also who just, it's too much, and they go the opposite direction. And I understand both. But yeah, you should get a lot of credit for what you've done. And I imagine your parents thank you, but like that, they can rest their head easier on the pillow at night because you're here, for your brother is.
I appreciate you saying that, but I always tell people that you're the real superhero, because the people that dedicate their lives to this, who don't have a sibling, don't have a child,
right,
and still make the decision to really dive head in and help a community that needs people to speak for them, needs people to stand up for them, and unfortunately doesn't get the respect that they deserve. So let's get back into your story, right?
Yeah.
So you're 18 years old, 18, 19 years old. You're coming back from this camp. You just got truly inspired and fulfilled by this work. You have that conversation. So you're like, I got to do more.
Yep.
Walk me through sort of how it all comes to
so then I moved over here in 2010. And started to do a master's in Long Island, New York. Started to do a master's in special ed, just with a concentration on autism, but knowing that I wasn't going to be a teacher. I just didn't think I would be any good at it, honestly. And knowing that adulthood and thinking about adults with disabilities is really where I had my passion from that conversation. And so we had the opportunity to start Spectrum Designs in a backyard barn. With an area not much bigger than the area we're in, with one cold SE DTG machine and 2 heat presses. I think we had one customer. I certainly didn't know what I was doing, but I knew what needed to be done.
But step back though, like, how did you decide that it was printing you were going to do? How did you, because you skipped over the whole, how this idea came.
I mean, look, I have co-founders, and both of them are parents of children who are now adults on the autism spectrum. They had been fundraising and doing stuff in the disability community for years, and every time whenever it was a walk or a volleyball tournament, a beer crawl, there's always merch, right? There's always merch. And so it was also 2010. It's only 2 years after the kind of 2008 financial crisis. So we literally were Googling recession-proof businesses, and turns out somewhat the apparel industry is now, we know, pandemic-proof too, or largely anyway. And that was it. And, obviously, and we talk about this in the book, but there is elements to this industry that lends itself to people who do well in situations where there's repetition, right? Where there's creativity, where there's quality control and attention to detail, and an endurance over a long period of time of where you're being asked to spot the same thing over and over again. So I'd love to say that there was some big business plan and some big business design, but I think there was a lot of passion. There still is a lot of passion. And there was a clear understanding of the capabilities of our workforce and where they would thrive, where we could level up or level down skills, break down tasks. And there's so many opportunities in this industry to teach those kinds of skills, as you know. And so, we started off with the autism community as our first customers, printing pictures of people who were doing walks and things like that. And then very soon it started gravitating towards, oh, well, listen, I'm a business owner. I have a moving and self-storage company, and my son's autistic, and I want to get all my uniforms from you guys, So it wasn't necessarily for autism. It was for a company, but it was directly connected. And then I love to say that we were good, and we still are good. And I think that's a really important message to entrepreneurs is you can have the best mission, or you can have the cheapest pricing, or you can have the best equipment. But if you're not just delivering a business service that people need on time at a quality that they're expecting, and you're answering your phone and emails, it's going to be hard to keep customers, So I think our team were really good at that early on as well.
So I think you hit on a point that you and I both like talking about, which is, while we're always sort of championing disability inclusion in the workforce, it's also a huge market segment that people should be marketing to, right?
Yeah.
And what better way to market to 1 out of 5 people in America have a disability family members, friends, and the people with the
Yeah, the whole
disability. Like,
network.
there's a huge market that people just kind of ignore, right? And if you're inclusive of that community, they'll support you. I mean, I remember I found out that Lyft has a program to help people with disabilities get to work.
Yeah.
And I immediately stopped using Uber and started using Lyft, right? Like, it was that simple to me. So that's really cool. So, all right, so you started off, you got one machine, you've got 2 heat presses. Are you doing the pressing and the protein?
Yeah, everything. And like self-taught with YouTube videos, going to the, ISS was at the time, but the impressions trade shows, and going to Printing United, and just like learning and watching, reading magazines, making a lot of mistakes, taking on orders we couldn't manage, printing through the night. And, every entrepreneur's got those stories, but it's saying yes and figuring it out, But I wasn't naturally very good at it. I'm also colorblind, which is funny for a guy that runs a merch company. So like, I'd have to be like, is this the right color? So I needed some help. I needed some help from our employees. It was humbling. But yeah, doing it all in a backyard barn with no air conditioning in hot New York summers. So yeah, it was an experience. But
all right. So at the onset, you were a for-profit business.
No, we were always a non-profit.
You started as a non-profit.
Yeah. We were always a non-profit. Not for any, I mean, look, there's pluses and minuses, right? I think for us, we wanted to be able to like fundraise to buy machines. We wanted to be able to write grants to buy machines. We also like the transparency of it. Like you can go online and look at all of our financials. And we were worried, this is, 15, 16 years ago. And we were worried that people might look at us as, trying to take advantage of people and whatever. So we were just like, if we're just radically transparent about everything that we're doing, no one can be like, they're employing people and they're not, especially because our mission, our raison d'etre, right, was to employ people. Like I say all the time, like we don't employ people to make t-shirts. We make t-shirts to employ people, and like that's the big distinction for us. We've just happened to do it a lot over the years now, which is great. And so being a nonprofit, it just made sense for us.
And so you started with you doing it. Talk to me about sort of the transition to making your first hire of somebody with disabilities, and how that continued to grow.
Just an amazing feeling. I mean, like I said, we were lucky that I'll give myself a little pat on the back. Like I understood that you can
give yourself a lot of pat on the back.
I understand you can have what you feel like is a really important mission, but at the end of the day, you got to have a business, you got to have market, you got to pay the bills, you got to keep the lights on, right? And so I understood that early on somehow, maybe from growing up, as we've talked about, right?
And necessity. If you don't figure it out, it's
but
going to
I've
end
seen
pretty
so
quick.
many nonprofits be like, well, people should just buy from us because of our mission. And you're like, it doesn't really work like that. Like you might get some, but like, you know what I mean? You've got to be good. And so, as we grew into a bigger space, and we started outsourcing screen printing because orders were getting too big for our one DTG machine. And I hated that because I didn't like the control. I couldn't see what was being done. I also felt like it was sort of like not mission drift, but like we could have been hiring people to do that work. So we started, getting some money together to grow into a space with screen printing and having, more employees. And so that was a great feeling. But I remember being so terrified. We took a lease for 3 years and the space was like 1,500 square feet, like, and it's funny now, but I remember just being like, what were we thinking? Like, this is, what are we going to do, And then we went from a manual to an automatic. I remember people, it's like Dylan going electric, you're like, what are you doing? You're ruining it, people should be pushing the squeegees. And it's like, no, like that creates more volume and more output, and that creates more jobs because and then you can be more competitive in the marketplace, and be more price competitive. And so all of those things were decisions that you always weighed against the mission, and like, well, are we drifting? And I always felt like as long as I could say, no, this is going to generate more hours of employment and more jobs and make us more competitive from a business point of view, price-wise, then like it's a no-brainer, So yeah, amazing feeling. I mean, still an amazing feeling giving people their first paycheck or their first job. Somehow it's more, and I imagine you feel this way too, but sometimes it's when people, the older ones, I find, like, we've given people who are in their 30s their first paycheck, and you're like, that almost means more because they've been volunteering or like doing stuff like dead end stuff for years and sort of taking advantage of a little bit. And I love that feeling. And, you know, it's so much more than the paycheck, you know, it's self-worth, it's structure, it's routine, it's friendships, for any employee. And I know it sounds cheesy and funny coming with this accent, but like it's access to a slice of the American dream, right? That we're all promised, you know? So I think employment is absolutely life-changing. It really is for people. And when you're told statistically that it's unlikely you're going to have access to it because of your diagnosis, oh, I mean, that must be really tough. That must be really tough. And there's still, as we know, so many people who are being told that or are realizing that. And so we hope businesses will continue to do this work, right? That's one of the goals of the book, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's also one of the goals of the podcast. I mean, I think that, you know, I always say that, you know, the feeling of changing somebody's life it's like a drug. I mean, it is that good. Like there is no amount of t-shirts that our business could sell that can compare to having a conversation with a parent who tells you that you changed their kid's life, or, you know, one of your employees coming to you and telling you that, hey, I can now move out of my parents' house and have independence. I remember that moment when my brother got it. And I think part of what we're doing with this podcast is really to try to help inspire people to seek out that feeling, because I think once you get a taste of it, you realize how much bigger the world is. And also, it's a lot easier to make an impact than you think. And you don't even have to have as many employees as me. You can literally change one person's life. And usually that just ends up being a snowball down a hill, right? Like, and I think that's sort of a beautiful thing. I think another thing that you said that I really liked hearing was, you know, treating, you know, you were a business that was a nonprofit, you know. I do a lot of stuff with nonprofit organizations, but a lot of them are foundations, like my brother's Fragile X. So I sit on the board of National Fragile X, and Seek, the organization that supports my brother with disability employment in D.C. One of the things I loved working about with them is because oftentimes when you work with sort of the foundations and those nonprofits, you know, they treat it like a nonprofit, but if they start treating it like a business, it's just going to make them infinitely more successful in everything that they do. Whereas, you know, a lot of my work is helping the nonprofits kind of have a more business savvy look at it. You kind of came from the opposite, where you're like, I already have the business approach. Now I'm doing the nonprofit. And I think that that's, you know, a wonderful combination. So, you know, Spectrum Designs then continued to grow though, right? So you started in a 1,500 square foot space, but like, you've scaled. You've got multiple locations. Walk us through sort of the growth and the scaling.
Yeah, we were, you know, we originally the vision was, all right, we'll get bigger, and then we'll have like one big centralized facility, 50,000 square feet, you know, 10 automatics, all this stuff. And, you know, we've all walked through facilities like that, and I love that. But I actually got some advice from one of those guys, Factory 77 are out in Long Island, and they were like, if I could do it all over again, I'd have smaller facilities in different geographies, because at the end of the day, we're selling a commodity here, and there's economies of scale. And if I'm doing 100,000 shirts and you're doing 1,000, like I might only be paying a nickel less per shirt. You know what I mean? Or whatever. Like it's really not that big difference. So like, don't deal with the stress, basically was the advice they gave me. And so then I took that and I was like, that's great advice from the industry. And I was like, and also so many of our employees, transportation is a struggle. You know, so like driving is not many of our employees drive. So we needed to be in places nearer to where people lived. So having a big centralized factory that's like no one is drivable only was not going to be a good mission decision either. So I took those two bits of business advice, mission advice. And so we now have an 8,000 square foot headquarters in Long Island, and it's like on Main Street, like, you know, and a couple of our employees and their families have bought houses nearby so they can walk to work. I mean, that is like a beautiful thing, And because I looked at it like they have so much trust and faith and belief in the business that, and that we have an anchor in that community, that they're going to move their kids to that community. They didn't grow up there, you know, like they're different tags. So, and they met at work, and they're using their paychecks to offset their mortgage and all that. And Amazing. And then we opened 5 years ago, opened a second facility in Westchester, about 50 miles north of New York City, or just north of New York City, 50 miles north of Washington, 8,000 square feet in a community near a Metro North train station, Starbucks, deli, all of that stuff, like being woven into the fabric of the community is really important.
Well, that's what I was thinking. A lot of your businesses that you get is local too.
Yeah, local and adding. And I think that's, again, part of that bigger story. Like, we're not here to just be like, hey, we're here. We're like, no, we want to enrich this community. We want to support the local events. We want to join the Chamber of Commerce. We want to do, and that's such good business advice too, because you need to get to know your community, right? And then finally, recently, only about 5 miles from where we are here, we opened in Hackensack in May, a much smaller facility, what I'd call like a satellite, that just has embroidery and DTF right now. It's only about 1,000 square feet, more of a proof of concept. But we already have 12 employees there, and 8 of them have disabilities. So it's integrated, but it's like you said, it's 8 new jobs, it's 8 new opportunities, 8 new lives changed, and it feels great. And proving the concept, proving the concept of growth.
People are always kind of talking to me about how great it is that, we have 10% of our staff have disabilities. And obviously we have a lot of employees.
Yeah.
10% is a significant number, but your numbers are incredible. So how many total employees do you have?
So we just ticked over 100, so I think 102, and 70% of those are
70%.
So
this is
about
where,
72 of our employees. Yeah,
that's absolutely incredible.
Well, and I think what's more incredible is that we've been so successful, right? It's like people go, oh, well, I say all the time, I'm like, we're successful because of our neuro-inclusive workforce, not in spite of it, not because, so it's because. We feel good about it. I still feel like it's nothing, though. You know what I mean? I still feel like we have to do so much more. I think that's what makes you an entrepreneur. That's the curse of the entrepreneur. It's never enough. It's never enough. And I'm like, I'm going to go to my grave being like, just a bit more, And it's funny because Tim, the COO, is like, can you just smell the roses for once, dude? And I'm like, I'm sorry. I will, I promise. But
it's hard. I mean, my mentor said the same thing to me. He goes, Jed, why do you even have goals? Because you hit a goal and you don't even stop to have a beer.
I know.
You're like, all right, on to the next thing. It's like, so,
it's a strength, though. It is. It's just an overextension of it can be a weakness, right?
But I think that's also what makes sort of the philanthropy be a great balance, because it's the business goals that are easier to kind of graze over. It's those micro moments where somebody's
on your shop floor,
on your shop floor, where you're like, oh my God, it like really resonates. Like, oh my God, I forgot this is how much of an impact
it's true.
That we're making. And 72 people's lives that you've changed, but you've changed far more than that, because you've changed their families' lives. You've changed the communities that they're in. And you've inspired other people to
Right, that's always my hope, right? It's to other businesses, like we're shedding light here, and through the book as well, but also just general thought, right? Like I want people to receive one of our products, read the story or hear about it and go, oh, wow, I didn't know someone with a disability could do that. You know what I mean? And then maybe when they're in the street and they see someone or they meet someone or whatever, they might then have a different perspective. That's a bigger thing than any T-shirt we could ever print, that someone's misconceptions could be changed or their stereotypes could be challenged by a product that we put out. That's a huge thing. And I genuinely believe that's what it is. That's why when I talk to our employees, I'm like, guys, they're just T-shirts. We're not splitting the atom here. You say that. And then they go, but they're also like a real example of capability. So let's take it seriously. Let's reward the trust that a customer's given us, and let's also use it as an opportunity to challenge misconceptions out in the world around the capabilities of people with disabilities.
Yeah, because
no pressure.
Because you may be a nonprofit, but this is not charity. This is a real business. As you said, people aren't just giving you the business because you're hiring people with disabilities.
A lot of customers don't even know.
Yeah. And a lot of the customers don't care either.
I don't care. Don't care.
But you got to perform.
You got to perform.
And I think something that both of us speak about all the time is we're talking about some of our best employees. My top warehouse employee out of 40 has autism. Our top shipper out of 25 has autism.
Yeah.
And, I love your story about sort of, we talk about sort of superpowers of people with disabilities and differentiators, and how people with autism are actually oftentimes more detail-oriented than people without disabilities.
Right.
And you have this great example about, you had an issue in the facility.
Yeah.
And everybody panicked.
And the power went out.
The power went out. So tell that.
Yeah, we were up against it. Every printer listening will have a story like this where, you're racing to beat the UPS truck, or, the truck, whatever's coming to take the order. And if it doesn't go, the world's going to end,
Every day. And usually happens also Fridays.
Yeah, what time is happening? Probably about now. In shops across the world. Anyway, so we had one of those. It was the middle of the summer. It was 100 degrees. And, we were running our dryers and everything. And all of a sudden, the power cuts out. And, just from over, I guess, pressure on the grid or whatever. And, I'm there because we're all printing and we're trying to hold off the UPS driver. And I'm frantically trying to call the super of the building. Other people are trying to turn the machine back on. One guy's laughing hysterically, I can't believe this is happening. And one employee on the spectrum thought about the 40 or so shirts that were slowly about to catch on fire, stuck underneath the heating element because the conveyor belt had stopped, and manually cranked the dryer so that the shirts flew out sizzling. And shortly thereafter, the power came back on, and we managed to finish the job. But my point of that story and why I love it so much is that the most important thing in that moment wasn't to be calling the super, wasn't to be trying to stop the UPS driver, wasn't to be, laughing or whatever. It was the shirts that were underneath the element, the heating element. And that employee thought of it and saved the job. We would have lost 40 of those shirts. We wouldn't have time to replace them. Would have lost the customer. Would have been a disaster. So yeah, that to me, I remember a lot because I would think about it all the time, because it's that we need different kinds of minds,
Yeah. And I think oftentimes when people think about hiring people with disabilities, we talk a lot about repetition and sort of both low skilled and high skilled. And I think oftentimes people still put people in the box, right?
Yep.
We have people with disabilities at all levels of our organizations. And in particular, I love the story about your marketing director and some of the successes there. So
yeah. I mean, we patted ourselves on the back for a little while because we were look, we're a company where people with disabilities make things. It's amazing. But we said to ourselves, what would it look like to not just be a company where people with disabilities make things, but a company made up of people with disabilities?
I love that.
All right. And so we started looking to ourselves and going, well, where are we not hiring people? Where are we putting inadvertent ceilings, right? And the marketing department was the first one. We actively were trying to find a marketing director, and we were just using, the regular channels because we were well, marketing, we hire someone who doesn't have a disability. That's literally, and that's us, right? So I don't blame the rest of the world. And so we said, well, hang on a minute. What if we could move some people around? We have someone who's really passionate about social media, who's working in a different part of the organization. We have someone who's doing social media who could do more. Both of them are neurodiverse. Let's shift them both up. And I remember saying it, and I proposed it to our executive team, and Tim doesn't mind me saying this, but he literally, our COO, Tim, turned around and said, I'm going to go with this because it's you, but I want to go on record saying this is the worst decision you've ever made, right? 6 months later, Kelly, who's our head of social media now, our new head of social media, she's autistic, makes a video that went viral, got 30 plus million views on across platforms. We went from 7,000 followers to 100 and something thousand followers, again on Instagram and everything. We were on the Kelly Clarkson show. I mean, the whole company has changed and is still changed. Our platform is completely different now. All because we made that move. And they've continued to, it wasn't a one-hit wonder. She's had multiple videos that have over 1 million views, which most marketing people would salivate over, and it would be a lifetime goal. And she's just doing it casually, and it taught me a good lesson that I just need to let our company run the way, let the people do what they need to do. The video that went viral, I was it's okay, before. And then it so I was what do I know? But also a company like ours, that your social media and your marketing is the mouthpiece of the organization. It should be it should be someone who's got that lived experience of what it is to be on the spectrum or have a disability. And it's that same thing. We're far better because of it. And yeah, Tim doesn't mind me sharing that story, but
how often do you remind him of that?
I mean, but you know what though, and to his credit, then we had a head of screen printing vacancy to fill, and he suggested one of our employees who was working on the presses and was autistic, and gave him the promotion. So he quickly, that's what one of Tim's, right? Like, he'll quickly go, oh, the science tells me this, I will change the science, I will change with the science. And so, yeah, he's now fully on board with all that,
Yeah.
And again, we've been thriving because of those decisions. And I'm really proud to say now we have, our marketing team, management roles, leadership, administration. There really aren't any areas where we're not inclusive and have neurodiverse voices now, which has made us much better.
And they're killing it. Again, it's not charity.
We just opened a new facility. You don't just do that. That's because the business is growing, and we're going to have a record-breaking year. And and it's not because of me. That's just because the team are consistently producing great products and making our customers happy. The marketing department's killing it.
The marketing videos are phenomenal.
They're going to gobble us up. They're going to love this, And yeah, I just keep out of the way and let them cook, as the kids say.
Oh yeah, the kids love saying that. So it's been an incredible ride. I mean, even in the time that I've known you, you've seen you open new locations, you've continued growing. And it's been really awesome to see, and congrats on sort of the record year and the trajectory that you guys keep coming. You guys deserve all the success in the world.
Thank you.
I think a big part of this podcast also is about the journey is, all too often when people see social media, they see, the accomplishments, and, you're on the Kelly Clarkson show. You're receiving awards from your Chamber of Commerce. You're all over the place, right? But they see all of sort of the positives. But I think a big part of what we're trying to get across is that it ain't always that sweet, and everybody is struggling to, hopefully inspire entrepreneurs when they're hitting their rock bottom to realize that everybody goes through that.
Yeah.
And even once you're successful, you're still going through those things.
Totally.
We just do a good job sort of compartmentalizing it. We don't sort of publicize it. So take me through some of the really hardest parts of this journey, both personally and professionally.
Yeah, so personally, I think becoming a dad has been really difficult, because I was one of those all in, almost a badge of honor that I worked through the night and slept on the office floor, and you know what I mean, and stayed late and traveled and got early flights here, and it was so cool. And you become a parent and you're like, oh, all my perspective has changed now, and am I really going to be lying on my deathbed going, I wish I printed more shirts, or I wish I, you know what I mean, or I wish I spent more time at work? No, you know what I mean? And what's it all for? So that really did change things. My daughter also was diagnosed with a seizure disorder a few years ago, and I was in hospital with her for 10 days. Thank God I had a company that understood that and didn't sort of, say, where the hell are you, and gave me the time and the grace. And it's scary. My phone could ring any time and I have to leave, and, and that's a very real thing. And that's been I was able to just focus on work, and now I have to, like you say, compartmentalize a lot. But I'm really proud that she'll have to take medication for the rest of her life. And there'll be stigma and everything, but the fact that she can see, literally have a front seat to seeing what Spectrum Designs does, I think will hopefully make her realize the world can be a kind and inclusive place. And so that was obviously a huge challenge that I've had to and still go through.
But it's got to give you perspective, where when that T-shirt order gets screwed up, that felt like the sky was falling before, and now you're like,
I'm like, I just spent 10 days in hospital, you know what I mean? And and you don't know if they're going to be okay, and you still don't know, you never know. Professionally, so many, right? So many, especially early on when the mistakes really hurt. I remember me and Tim, we were printing over a weekend, and I ended up making the UPS labels, and I scrolled down. I was supposed to go to Pennsylvania, and they went to Michigan, and and that was like, at the time, I don't know, it was like a $5,000 order maybe, and I remember just being like, I don't know how we're going to recover from this, and like had to drive the new order to Pennsylvania 3 days later, and you do all those things though, and like I think the biggest thing I could share with someone is like, you're going to make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. It's how you respond to the mistakes as a business leader, but also just as a company. Are you going to point the finger? Are you going to say, well, you approved the proof? Or are you going to say, you know what, you did, we'll figure this out. Ton of moments of like, they say kind of heavy is the head that wears the crown. A lot of those moments, loneliness too. You feel people stop talking sometimes when you come in the room, or, the lunchroom gets quiet because I like to think not because of me, but just the title. That sucks. You want to have more friends that, you see people going out for drinks and hanging out, and I get an invite every now and then, but I get it, and that's sometimes tough because, you're no better or different to your employees. You just have this title and this role because, you worked hard and you deserve it, but like you want to be part of that too. And so that can be difficult.
It gets worse as you get bigger too.
Does,
I remember when our first business, had 20 employees. I knew employees' dog names,
right,
and it was such a small, like,
and you can be that way, but then it gets to a point, like you said, when you get to a certain size where it's like you're sort of advised not to, and I hate that, but I get it.
I remember being judgmental of larger organizations where they had lost that.
Yeah.
But then as your organization grows, you realize it's an impossible task.
Yeah.
It's a thankless job too, because,
nobody really knows what you're doing.
Nobody really knows what you're doing.
I think you're just doing a podcast,
It's like,
but you're doing so much more.
Yeah. And you truly care about these individuals who's like, you're responsible for their livelihoods.
Yeah.
So you want to like be a deeper part, but it's just not, the bigger you get, it's just not possible. Which is also just all the more reason why you got to hire great leaders who can sort of be.
Yeah. That's it. That was the biggest thing for me, was learning what I didn't know, right? And learning where I wasn't good, and then hiring those people to complement those skills. Cause like, I have no problem being like, I'm not good there. Like, let's put someone who knows how to do this in there, and that gives you the opportunity to separate yourself a little bit. But yeah, it's been a road, and I don't know, we've talked about this, but I try not to get too up or too down over anything, right? Like, and it's very hard early on. But if you can kind of stay measured and level as much as possible. So we're having a great year. We're going to have a record-breaking year. Okay. Next year might not be that way, and that's going to be okay too. I used to be like, I would live by the numbers. I'd live by, with cash flow. I mean, ask Tim, I'd be a nightmare January, February, March, when like normally, a little quieter. And then I'd be all happy again in April. And now I'm like, all right, I know it's just a pattern, and that's how it's going to be. And we'll stay true to what we're doing, and just not get too high and not get too low,
Well, I think remaining even keel, as an entrepreneur, business owner is easily maybe the most important thing, because there's as many successes as getting knocked down, and you just got to keep getting back up. And it's funny because I've always thought of you as so even keel, and
it wasn't always that way.
It wasn't always that way.
And it's still, listen, I'm never perfect. No one's perfect. Like, something could set me off in the car on the way home, and I'll be like,
I remember the book that you actually sent me was The Daily Stoic. To help me to gain some more even keelness, because I was having a moment. So no, I mean, look, I think what you're doing is absolutely beautiful. Obviously, as a sibling in the community, nothing makes me happier than knowing that you've got 72 people that you've changed their lives, like my brother had his life changed, and the fact that it's never enough, and I know you're just going to keep growing this and more locations, and I think that is a wonderful thing, and I'm really proud to call you a friend, co-author, and
thank you. Likewise.
So every podcast, I like to end it because, a big part of this podcast is shedding a spotlight on people that are doing incredible things in the industry, right? And so many people have shed a spotlight on me through speaking engagements and webinars and interviews and articles. This is also a way to sort of pay it forward, and shed a spotlight on all the other people doing such incredible things like yourself. So one question I ask every guest is, if you were going to shed a spotlight on somebody else in the industry that you think is doing good for the community and giving back, who would you want to shed a spotlight on?
Yeah, I'm going to give it to our co-author, Marshall Atkinson. He doesn't publicize it, but for years now, he's been consulting for us pro bono. I hope he doesn't mind me saying this. Gives his time. He's always wanted to do it. He's given hundreds, thousands of hours to us. He connected you and me. He's helped us through so many operational or even just systemic or even, machinery-based decisions. He's just been a real amazing help for us, as he has to so many others. And like I said, I'm very grateful that he connected us as well, and thought enough to say, hey, you guys need to meet. So I'm very grateful. We'll be forever grateful to Marshall Atkinson for.
Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful story. I mean, the fact that he has
his nephew. And he's all the way in Arizona. It's never that his nephew's going to get. It's not like he's doing it to serve himself. He just believes in the greater good. And he's never charged us a cent.
And I don't think a soul knows that story until they hear this podcast or read the book.
Yeah.
So thank you again for joining us. The book is coming out. It is finally complete. We've had a number of delays. Once again, it's Inclusivity, and you can get a free downloadable copy on inclusivity.com. That's inclusivity, but just throw a K in between the N and the C. It was a pleasure having you guys. Please, hope to see you again next month for our next episode. And please like and subscribe. And Patrick,
thanks,
keep doing what you're doing, man. It's awesome.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Much.
Been through struggles, had to conquer them all. We rise and give back to answer the call. We measure success by the lives that we shape. Making an impact, we're raising the stakes.
This episode of Raising the Stakes was brought to you by Cornate Connections, bringing the print industry together for a higher purpose.